Yasher Koach, Izzy, Yasher Koach, Vivian. I have to tell you that I love and hate that you can relate to the women of the Torah. My whole career as a rabbi is dedicated to making the Torah relatable, to drawing parallels or at least connections between our lives and our world and the world of Torah. We're always asking B'nai Mitzvah to build a bridge between the words in the scroll and the world that they see around them, whether in our country or their family or their own lives. And it's often not easy to relate to life 2,500 years ago. The fact that you can in any way see yourself or our world in the ordeals of the women of 2,500 years ago means that not enough has changed. Hearing your two pieces reminded me of marching on Washington for reproductive rights in 1989. It reminded me of the 1972 Equal Rights Amendment, which failed and has never passed. All it said was that women and men were equal. It reminded me of Sojourner Truth and the Seneca Falls Convention and the Combahee River Collective and Bella Abzug and Geraldine Ferraro and Hillary Clinton's campaign for president against Donald Trump, which we all remember. And more recently, the Me Too movement and all the women who came forward to name abusers. I hate the fact that we're here and a new generation of 13-year-olds reading about societal abuse of women in the time of the Torah don't just say, wow, that was so backward, so patriarchal, so unequal, but also say, I kind of recognize that. Our world is different, we've come really far, and it's also not totally different. And also say, I'm afraid that men are going to make decisions about my body. And also say, a lot has changed and a lot has not. I want to live in a day when the Sota ritual is so remote from anything we know that none of us can relate to it. I'm even willing to relinquish my general plan of getting everyone to relate to everything for that. I want to remind us, as both of you did, that women's voices are not recorded in this episode and in a lot of Torah. We do not actually know how the women of the time responded to this ritual. We do not know what they were thinking because it's not recorded. It does not mean that they were not speaking. It's not recorded. We do not know what kind of resistance there might have been. We do not know what kind of power was invested in the ritual by the women subjected to it. It's possible they were terrorized by it, given that their status depended upon childbirth and child rearing. But it's also possible that they rolled their eyes at men's pathetic attempts to assuage other men's jealousies. We don't know. We don't know if they protested. We don't know if they undermined it in some subtle way that's not recorded. We don't know if they had an entire underground network to support each other through this ordeal. We don't know. I would like to imagine that they did. I would like to imagine that they were savvy and networked and had their own form of subversive power. So I went looking for any kind of hint like that in the text, any hidden sign to this effect, and I feel like I found one. Let's see if you agree. The waters that the women in the Sota ritual had to drink were called me marim, which mean bitter waters. But the word bitter in plural, marim, mem, resh, yud, mem, are the exact same letters in the exact same order, just with different vowels, and the vowels are not recorded in the Torah, as the most famous woman of the wilderness generation, Miriam. Not only that, but we know that Miriam was the provider of water. Famously, in Torah, Miriam was a prophet, and her special gift was that she brought water to the people whenever there wasn't water. And in other places, we have bitter water being turned sweet. So, I wonder whether, when the women came to drink the water, and it was called maybe it was called Me Miriam, it's possible, to them or whatever, that they were calling upon their sister in the wilderness, traveling with them, the most powerful woman of their time, who was a prophet, to sweeten this bitter water. And I wonder whether through this underground network, that they supported each other through these ordeals of patriarchy, not just this one, but many. And I wonder whether they understood this drink to be protected by the prophet herself. In next week's portion, Miriam confronts Moses in an episode she gets punished for. And in that episode, one of the readings of that episode is that she is acting in solidarity with another woman, Moses' wife, Zipporah. She confronts Moses, who apparently has been staying separate from Zipporah so that he's always ready to be with God. And she says, aren't others of us also prophets? In other words, you're not the only one that God ever speaks to. Why are you separating from your wife when the rest of us manage to have a family life as well as being close to God? God does not like this. God punishes her. Certainly in the Peshat of the Torah, this is not considered a good action that she takes. But if we see it as another act of solidarity between women, this whole thing could start being a pattern. I like this reading. We do know for sure that 6 Torah portions later, the Torah actually names, by name, 5 women who stood up for women's rights, explicitly, directly, in the text, confronting Moses and all of the elders of the people at the tent of meeting in front of everybody, declaring that the laws as they stood were unjust. They successfully advocated to change the laws of inheritance, enabling women to inherit their own land, the land of their fathers, and potentially be free from men's domination. The Torah actually tells us that God agreed with them and said that they were right. It's one of the only times we see women acting in the Torah like this. And they do so with great courage, as you told us to, Izzy, that required courage, and that this moment requires courage. As terrible as it is that we have to fight for basic rights we've already won, we've already marched for, it's actually, in some sense, an opportunity and an honor to stand with the kind of courage that our ancestors stood with. Those of Torah and those of the last 2 millennia, or 3. Sometimes we will organize underground, creating networks like abortion funds and escort services and sanctuaries that get women across state lines for the services they need. And sometimes we'll march on Washington or get arrested at the Supreme Court. I probably will do that. Public things like the daughters of Zelophehad, the daughters who stood up 6 portions from now, to argue and win our rights in front of the whole community. Either way, we join with a long line of women who never gave up on each other and never gave up on equality and knew they deserved it, and we still do. May we continue to act with their courage and ours. May we never give up hope. May we continue to march with each other and organize with each other for the equality and the justice we all deserve. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.